Okay, so while we're getting things organized, we're going to talk a bit about how to control what you can see in your viewport. Now, I've got this complicated solar system mobile scene where I've got a bunch of various different kinds of things. I've got a couple of polygons, I've got these little curves I've made. These labels are also just polygons. And I've got a camera, and I actually have a light sitting inside the sun, which allows me to make the Earth look properly lit at all times, so you can see never see any light behind it, only where it's shining on this side. So, a bunch of things inside my scene. Now, this can get a little too complicated for our eyeballs to handle after a while, so you're gonna want to have to be able to, you're gonna want to control what you see at any time. There are a couple of little things, like if you click on something and hit Control 1, everything but that will vanish temporarily. You'll notice the visibility of things in the outliner hasn't changed, nothing is in gray. The Earth orbit and all this stuff is still supposedly visible. It just limits it. It doesn't actually control the little visibility of the object. But also we can control what kinds of things we see. So, if I go to Show, I see a list of every single kind of thing that can be shown here. At the very bottom, for example, I could turn off my grid, and now my solar system is just floating in space without that grid getting in the way. I'll go ahead and turn that back on. But here's polygons. Now those are off. Well, let's say I don't need these curves and this camera getting in the way. Maybe I'm just trying to click on my moon and every now and then this camera gets in the way. Or I'm trying to click on this curve right here and the moon keeps on getting in the way. Once things start getting in the way, let's control things. I'm going to say show none and then just show my polygons. Now I'm just doing some modeling. Or maybe show none again, but I just want to see those curves that I made. Go to show and you'll be able to control what you see. As we go further and further into the class and you make more and more kinds of objects, this will become more and more useful. Also, I want to talk about layers. You can see in the channel box at the bottom right here, there's a thing called display and anim. Display is just what we see, animation will be for animation layers, which we might get into later on. But what I've got here is two layers that allow me to control what I can see here. But for the sake of teaching, I'm going to go ahead and delete these layers just for a minute to show you how I made them. So, what I want to do is say I want to work on these polygons, these three things, and everything else is just display. The planets need to stick around, I want everything else to vanish. So what I'm going to do is click on just my solar system, that's the group that contains all this stuff, that'll do nicely. And I'm going to go to layers. I can either create an empty layer or create layer from selected. Let's start with an empty layer. And it says layer 1. It's not very descriptive. I'm going to go to the beginning here and say solar system layer. You'll need to make underscores instead of dashes or spaces. This naming system is hardcore, old school computer stuff. It doesn't like anything other than underscores. That's shift minus. Hit save. So now I've got the solar system layer. And I have three little boxes next to it that allow me to control how it's seen. The V is obvious, visibility. Oh, I should add some things to it first, sorry. Solar system. I'm going to click on my solar system, right click on the solar system layer and say add selected objects. Okay, now I can control stuff. So the V for visibility, turns it on or off. This P is for playback. So by default if you hit play, things will show up. For example, I might not want this camera and this stuff to show up. Later on we're going to animate characters. You can see these rigs made of all these curves and buttons and knobs sticking off the characters, but when you hit play you don't want to see them. So let's say I just don't want to see these polygons when I hit play. It makes no sense, I'm turning off the wrong stuff, but I turn off P and I hit play, this stuff vanishes. In a second we'll do that for the display stuff. And this third box goes from normal to template to reference. Normal is they're just there. There they are. Template is their wireframe, as though I had hit 4 on my keyboard and I can't click them. Just this gray wireframe to ghostly show me where they are. And reference, they're perfectly visible, but I can't click them, no matter what. At least out here. You can still click them in the outliner. Just so you don't accidentally click on the Earth over and over again when you're trying to select that curve, or maybe I want to mess with this curve and I don't want to grab the Earth when I grab it. It allows you to control what you grab. Let's go ahead and make another layer. I have a group here for everything else in my scene called display. I'm going to say layers, create layer from selected. And once again, you do want to keep things named display layer. So, playback. This display is totally unnecessary for my animation. I hit play, now it vanishes. Very nice. Even though the camera is still functional, you just can't see it hovering over there. And I can just turn off the display whenever I need to, and if the display is all done, I don't need to mess with it, I can just turn it to reference, unclickable. And that is how you control what you see in your scene. A little bit of viewport control and a bit of layers, and you can make a very complicated scene much easier to deal with.